Hey guys, welcome back. So in this video, let's discuss about APIs. So what are these APIs? We we seem to hear this term a lot in programming and everywhere in the computer science. So what exactly is this application programming interface? It's just a practice. So what is practice? So uh, any application, if it needs some sort of resource, or it needs anything from s- uh, from some other application, it is going to send a request, it is going to get the data. But how are we going to request that data? What is the way that we're going to ask the other application that I need this data? So the way to establish a communication link between two programs is what an API is going to do. API is the application programming interface, which is an interface which is agreed by the two applications to share data. So, what are examples of an API? Is it just the API that we use in web to actually call some sort of maps or something? No, API can be anything. It can be any program which is calling any other program. So, what could be example? A system call could be an example. So here we can see that we have written some program in C. So we have used this a printf. So printf is a function which is defined in C, but C itself is not capable of printing something onto the console. It needs the operating system. So how is it gonna ask the operating system, which is again a program, to print something onto the console? It is going to use a function called as write. It is a system function. It is a function managed by the operating system, and printf is a function which is managed by the C programming. Then we needed some sort of a standard C library, which is the API. So using this API, I'm going to call that a write method, and I'm going to provide this data to be printed on this console. So a system call is an example, and then we use this a lot. So all the programming libraries that we use, they're nothing but APIs, because in our program you wanted to use the a system.out.println, but the system class is not defined by us. It is with the Java. So we have to import that. So we are actually importing that class, and we are creating and we are creating the class system, and then we are calling the println method. So this is also nothing but an API. And then the resources on internet. So this is actually the most common example that we always came across. Is, okay, let's say you have an app, and you need to show a weather on that particular day. Then you're going to call some a weather API, and the weather API is going to give you the results based on your request, of your location. It is going to give you the result. So here we are using the internet as the medium to actually make a call, right? So these are some examples of API. Now let's see what exactly is the functions of API. Uh, why something like an API was needed in the first place. So usually a client server. So this is how any application works usually. So we're gonna have a client, we're gonna have a server, and we're gonna have a database. So a client needs to send a request, and the server needs to send a response. But there is no standard way in which a client can ask something. What is the way that we're gonna ask something from the server? And and also the a server is not supposed to expose everything to the client, because some of them might be a private data, which should not be exposed. Okay. Then how is it going to uh, tell the other systems that these are the endpoints that I'm exposing, and you can make a call to these ones, and this is the format of the response that I'm going to give. So uh, this sort of agreement will be availed using the APIs. So on on the server, we are going to have some sort of software, which is the API. So API is going to manage the request. It is going to it so API needs to be, uh, the client needs to be aware about the API of the server, because API won't accept any request which is in any format. API expects the requests to be in a specific format. If it is a web request, we are expecting some sort of protocol, or some sort of methods uh, on how the retrieval should happen. So API is going to define some standards, and the a client should know the standards, and the a client has to interact with the API only in the standards defined. Okay, so we're going to define the API standards, but how are we going to define the API standards, and how can we expose that to the other clients? So API layer is actually responsible for all these things. It is responsible for authentication, and it is responsible for the endpoints. Endpoints is the most important thing that we need to understand. An endpoint is nothing but a resource which can be called, which is exposed. So only the exposed resources can be called. It internally might have hundreds of files, but it is only going to expose you only a one file. So if that file is being exposed, it should be exposed as an endpoint. It should be exposed with the endpoint, and that endpoint will be unknown to the client tab, so that it can ask for it. And then if it's a web API, it is going to handle HTTP methods, because a request could be in a specific way, but uh, the method is actually the action which is going to define uh, how that a request has to be processed, and what is the expected action that has to be done. And then we have the data format, because usually in the web API we either see XML or JSON, but there could be any other format of exchange. And then we have the status code. So the status code is also very important, because uh, when we are responding to the client, it is not always the case that we can it is always a successful return. So it might have some sort of inferences. So we have to provide with the details of whatever uh, the response that we are sending. If it's success, then we have to provide the a status code which is going to show them that if there is any error, we have to assign a different status code. So it should also be managed by the API layer. And then and then we have three types of API. So first one is the public API. So the public APIs are available on the internet. Anyone with uh, a minimum authentication can actually access them. And then we have something called as a product APIs, or see, the product APIs are not exactly private. They are exposed on the internet, but they are only exposed to the ones who are either customers of them, or either they have met some requirements. For example, if you are trying to use ChatGPT. So a ChatGPT has one API which is which anyone can use. So it can be seen as the a public API. And then if you want to use some models of it, which are very recent models, then you have to uh, at- take some sort of a membership, and then you should be using them. So in that way, you can say that we are using the product of it, which is not exposed to everyone, but it can be exposed given some standards are achieved. And then we have the private API. A private API is just an internal API. So it will be only visible to the organization. It won't be exposed anywhere on the internet. And then we come to the REST API. So APIs can be written in many ways. There are many other architectures as well, like the ASOP architecture, and then we have the RPC, and then we have the GraphQL, and all these other things. But as we are interested in developing a web application, we'll be using the REST API standards. So REST API standards are nothing but REST API is going to work with HTTP. HTTP is almost the only protocol that REST is going to work with, and it is going to have a URL. A URL is actually defined by the REST in a specific way. How we need to create the URLs, and then the server has to respond in the format of JSON. So this is how the REST API is very specific about the request and the responses. And then the principles. So the REST API. So these are the six REST API principles. So so any API which is implementing REST, it should be cacheable. So by cacheable, we mean that the results of this API should have the ability to be stored in some sort of intermediate memory. It should be cacheable, and then we have something called as code on demand. So on demand. So many other protocols are when we request something. So uh, they're going to fetch all of the data which is requested. But a REST API defines something called as the on-demand retrieval. So using the on-demand retrieval, we use a different techniques like pagination. So using this technique, so we can only request some part of some part of the a response to be given at a time, and when requested, we were to fetch the other parts of the request. And then the other is the stateless. As you know that HTTP is a stateless protocol. REST API also expects the API to be stateless because if we were to store all the information about the request, it is going to make our API system a bit a bluffy. So instead of that, and then it should be a layered system. So this is how. So the principle of actually achieving a layered system is what is defined by the URL. So here we can see that there is a layer of service, and then there is a layers of service, and then some repositories. So we have to define some sort of layers of exposing the data. And then the uniform interface, and we want the interface of the user to be uniform. So we don't want the interface to be always changing for any specific request. And then it should be used in the client server architecture. So as it's always defined on the web, it is going to use the client server architecture. So this is how usually we send the REST API request. So here the resource is the post. So if we use the HTTP method as get, we are going to retrieve the post, and if the request method is a post, then we have to send some data in the HTTP body, which will be retrieved at the server, and some data will be created in the database, and the status code will be written. And and we use the get with an input. So it is going to so it can be used as a filter. And then put is going to be used to update the already existing resource. And then at last you have the delete, which is going to delete the request. And then so these are the main uh, response codes of the HTTP protocol. So we mainly have a 4 series. So the 200 series is for acknowledgement and a success, and the 3x series is for the redirection. If the resource that we want to access, if it was redirected into some other URL, then this status code will be returned to us along with some information about the redirection. And then the 400 and then the 400 series is about the client side errors. So here the not found is the error that we usually see, because when the resource is not found, that means the client is responsible for not calling the right resource. So it is a client side error. And then we have the forbidden and bad request. All of these are actually the responsibilities of the client, which are not achieved, so that we are going to assign this error status. And then we have the 500 series. So this is all about the server errors. So we usually uh, uh, don't see a lot of them, because once the application is tested, so usually there won't be any errors on the server side. But one error could be the internal server error. So let's say the server was shut down due to some issue, then it is going to respond you with the status. So let's see what. Okay, and now let's try to map the methods and the status codes. So here, when we are using the uh, get method, we can either get okay, because whatever the request that we have given, so we have the data, so it is going to fetch it. And then we have the a bad request, forbidden, and not found. They could they are returned if the resource is not found. And then for the post call, so a 201, it is responsible for created. So whatever the data that we have passed using the request body, it was created, and this response code will be there. And if not, we're going to get the same 400 series, and the same goes to put and delete. So this is how the REST API is going to work. So if we were to create a REST application in Spring, so this is usually how we try to create it in the Spring. So we're going to define a class called as my controller, and for this my controller, I'm going to define an annotation called as the REST controller. So by defining this annotation, Spring is going to recognize this class as the main control for the REST application. And then I'm giving the request mapping as slash API. That means uh, any request which has this API, so uh, which are after the URL API are going to be diverted into this class. And then inside the class we have the get mapping and the post mapping. So since the mapping is a single REST controller, it should be responsible for implementing all of the methods, because the request could have any HTTP method. So we have to implement all the HTTP methods, and whatever is going to be returned in this mapping functions is actually will be assigned as the response to the caller. So this is all about the REST API.